Hello, homeschool friends. Sabrina Justison here from sevensistershomeschool.com. And I've been away for a couple of weeks. And did you miss me? Because I missed you. I really do miss talking to my homeschool little sisters. You know that sevensistershomeschool.com, that's where we came from. We were acting as big and little sisters to each other in our local homeschool community. And that whole way of reaching out and just encouraging people who are walking the same road, people who are coming up a couple of years behind you on that road, or even encouraging people who are ahead of you on that road and are facing things that you know you're going to face at some point in your homeschool journey. And you can be a loving friend, an encourager, a comfort to them. That whole sisterhood that came out of our local homeschool community is where sevensistershomeschool.com came from. And there may be some of you who don't know that story. And so there are 6 of us. There's me, obviously. And then there's my biological sister, Allison. And then the others were not actually related to one another by blood, but there's Marilyn and Vicky and Sarah and Kim. So Sabrina, Allison, Marilyn, Vicky, Sarah, and Kim. And for 20 plus years, we lived in the same general area. We homeschooled in the same local community. We co-opted together. We started a day school together. We ran drama camps together. We took field trips together. We just did homeschool life together. And along the way, my daughter Rebecca fell in love with Marilyn's son Casey, and fortunately, Casey fell in love with Rebecca too. And so they got married 7 years ago, and now they have a little granddaughter, my little granddaughter, Marilyn's little granddaughter, Sloan. And so it's neat. It's a lot of years of history. And our homeschooling resources, our curriculum at sevensistershomeschool.com comes from this very real place. Real homeschool moms, real friends, real sisters in the Lord. And we're hoping that you will join us and be our 7th sister. We're all a little bit older now. In fact, I'm just broadcasting my age today. So here we go. Let's see. My sister Allison got me this shirt for my birthday, which was a couple of weeks ago. So can you guess how old I am? You know, it's just not worth fighting it because on social media, like everybody knows how old you are anyway, right? So if I've got to be 50, I can at least be fabulous, and there can be bling and shoes involved, right? And one of my favorite words is fabulous. I use it all the time. So my sister obviously knows me well and loves me well, and she got me this cool purple, because purple's my favorite color, shirt for my birthday, and these cool earrings too. Aren't they cute? Little turquoise and purple thing going on there. And yeah, 50 and fabulous. You know what? You're going to get older. Guess what, Mama? You are not always going to be focused on raising young kids or even raising teenagers. And there's a whole piece of the equation that is you. And so I'm just doing a momentary public service announcement before we dive into the poetry discussion this morning. Because I took a couple of weeks off because I needed to do a little self-care. It's been a hard year for me. If any of you follow me personally on Facebook, you know that our family just had a really bumpy year. It's been very tiring. And as we headed into the fall, I talked to my sisters at sevensistershomeschool.com, who are my business partners, and just said, look, I need to kind of take it easy this fall. I need to take a week or 2 off here and there, do a little traveling, and do a little self-care. I did important self-care too, like I got my mammogram, and I got my OBGYN checkup, and I went to the dentist and got my teeth cleaned. If you know me, you know that I would have 13 mammograms before I would have my teeth cleaned. I am petrified of the dental chair. And what's really funny is our son is our dentist. So, like, really, you can't get much closer to your dentist than that unless you're, like, married to a dentist. And even so, he has to write me a prescription just to chill me out enough that I can sit in the chair to have my teeth cleaned. But I did it. You know why? Because you got to take care of yourself. Self-care is not about soaking in a bubble bath, although that can be very lovely. Self-care is about taking a long, hard, honest look at yourself in the mirror, a prayerful, honest look at yourself in the mirror on a regular basis. That's my definition of self-care. So sometimes that is some prayer time in the car when I actually don't have any distractions, nobody's riding with me, whatever. And I'm driving a route that I know well, and I feel like I can really concentrate on prayer. And I say, God, show me where I'm out of balance and where I'm in balance, where things are working the way you designed them to, and where I'm creating a mess, or where I'm trying to do something in my own strength. Self-care is taking that hard look and recognizing where things are out of balance and then committing to do something about bringing them back into balance. So this fall, I will be coming and going a little bit on Facebook Lives. I will be taking another couple of weeks of travel as the fall unwinds, and I'm excited about that. And I also kind of miss the natural rhythm that I have been in for several years now with Seven Sisters and with the Facebook Lives and with interacting with customers online and answering your questions and talking to you in the Facebook group and all of that. But I want you to know that I'm doing it on purpose because taking care of ourselves is really important. God wants us to be good stewards of the lives that He's given us. And your life involves more than just homeschooling. And since homeschooling is most of what we talk about at sevensistershomeschool.com, I just wanted to take a minute this morning to just kind of share from my heart that there is more to you than a homeschool parent. God designed you to be you. You be you. I've said it to my kids their whole lives. And God did not mess up when He designed you, and He made you with a body that needs to be taken care of, and He made you with a heart and emotions and relationships and longings, and He has allowed there to be wounds and hurts in your life that need time and that need attention. And He has people in your life that are not just people that you're supposed to serve, although we are designed to serve, but they're also people that we're supposed to be in genuine relationship with. And sometimes that means we receive from them. Sometimes that means that we allow others to serve us. All of those things being in balance makes for a healthy homeschool mama and a healthier homeschool because of it. So self-care, there you go. Get your mammogram and get your dental cleaning and make your appointment with the OBGYN and do all that stuff because it does matter. You got to take care of yourselves. Okay, I'm going to put something in the comments that lets everybody know that the first however many minutes had nothing to do with poetry. Let's talk about poetry, because poetry is, it's not well loved, and it's often misunderstood. And I don't just mean the poems are misunderstood. I mean, the idea of teaching poetry in high school is thought of as a chore, as something that you're going to have a really hard time selling your teen on why it actually matters. You might have a hard time selling yourself on why it matters. There's a lot of misunderstanding that goes around poetry. I'm going to try to clear some of that up this morning. Poetry is a really unique form of communication through words. And I got to teach a poetry class in our local homeschool community to high schoolers last year. And it was really interesting and a lot of fun. Most of them were 11th graders, I believe, 10th or 11th graders. And so several of them came in saying, yes, I like poetry. I like to read poetry. I like to write poetry. There were a number of people who said, I don't know that I really like poetry. I like to write song lyrics. And so that's poetry. And it is a particular, very Western style of poetry, very contemporary style. That's okay. Poetry is poetry. Some of them said, can't stand poetry. And I'm in this class because my mom said I had to take it, and I have to check that box on my plan for the year. Okay, that's all right. So we had kids that ran the whole gamut in this class. And by the end of our poetry time together, they were all on board. They were all on board. And here's why. Because we approached poetry from the idea behind it. We dealt with the concept of why poetry exists, where it comes from, and why it can be important and powerful, and why it can be fun. All right, so poetry is like somebody who is a musician, okay, and they've learned to play the scales on the piano, and then they've learned how to read the notes on the page, and then they've learned how to make those two things happen at the same time. So now they're reading the notes and playing the notes at the same time, and they've moved up through more and more and more difficult pieces of music. All right, and they get to a point where you put Chopin in front of them. Chopin is not for the faint of heart, from what I understand. I don't really play piano. I fake piano, so Chopin and I will never be meeting one another on the piano keyboard. But I understand that Chopin is often described as your two hands playing notes that have absolutely nothing to do with one another. So, brainy, hard stuff. Why would anybody play Chopin? And why did Chopin write Chopin, right? I mean, if it's that complicated, if there's all these rules about exactly how things have to fit together, because when we listen to it, it does sound like the two hands are doing something that goes together, right? It doesn't sound disjointed. It sounds incredibly intricately connected. So why would somebody learn to play and then keep playing harder and harder and harder things and then compose harder and harder things? And really the same is true with poetry. For some people, writing poetry is very natural. The feel of different meters just makes sense to them. The rhythmic piece of how the syllables fall. Okay? For some people, rhyme scheme is just intuitive. For most people, it is not. Most of us do not speak in iambic pentameter like Shakespeare's plays were written in. Okay? But for a few people who are the natural poets of this world, that stuff is just organic. For the rest of the universe, you need to understand that writing poetry is choosing to express ideas and choosing to do it in a particular format, okay? It's like that musician saying, I already know how to do this, this, and this. I want to see if I can do this, okay? I already know how to play X, Y, or Z. I want to try to play Chopin. I want to see if I can do it. It's a composer saying, I have gotten really pretty confident in composing according to these rules in these time signatures. 4/4 and 3/4 are both easy. But writing in 5/4 is not something I've ever tried. I want to see if I can do it. I want to see if I can share the music that's in my heart in this particular format. And that is essentially what poets do. They have something in here, something in their heart that they want to share. They have ideas, they have inspiration, they have experienced things with their senses, things that they've observed, something that they've seen, something that they've heard, something that they've smelled or tasted, something that they've touched, feelings that they've experienced, relationships, things that have moved them that they want to articulate in words. And there are a lot of ways that they could choose to do that. And a poet chooses to articulate those ideas according to a particular set of rules. And these rules are not arbitrary. They were not sent down by God for, this is how, it's not like the laws of nature. It's not like the law of gravity. These are rules that the poet has chosen to adhere to. It's basically a way of challenging herself or himself and saying, I want to see if I can do it. I want to see if I can express this thing that I want to express in words. And I want to see if I can do it following a particular set of how many syllables per line, or within a sonnet format, or whatever. There's so many different styles, but they choose a set of rules and say, I want to see if I can do this. All right. So that's one thing. A lot of kids have never thought about, and maybe moms too, have never thought about the fact that part of what is cool about poetry is that this is a place where we find writers who have ideas that they want to express in words, who have set a challenge for themselves and said, I want to see if I can do it according to this structure and format. And that's neat. That's like watching somebody push themselves, an athlete push himself, a dancer push herself, whatever. It's cool when we watch somebody who says, I know I can do this. I want to see if I can do it this way, where it's even a little bit more challenging. All right. So we're watching somebody personally extend themselves when we read their poetry. Additionally, poetry is intended to be listened to. It's fine to read it on the page. It's more important to read it aloud. It is musical. Because it is written according to a meter, because there is a rhyme scheme, or even in free verse where there is not a set meter or rhyme scheme, the words have been chosen because of their sounds. And so when we read it out loud, we have a very different experience than when we just read it on the page. Now, a lot of teens are not going to be happy if you ask them to read a poem to you out loud, if they're not poetry people. So the best place to start is to listen to people who really love poetry and who really feel it, get it, and understand this beauty of how it sounds. Listen to them read it. YouTube, hello, most wonderful thing in the world. You can find so many video clips of people, in some cases the poet himself or the poet herself, sharing their own work, but reading it the way it's meant to be heard. That right there can be so inspiring, and I found that my teens last year in my class loved that, but that was kind of our starting point. We listened to people read poems who really wanted to read the poem out loud. And it was a wonderful learning experience to hear how they did it. And the kids went away and said that they read silently on the page in a different way. They heard it in their heads differently, even when they were reading poems silently later. Now, we always encourage them when you have a new poem that you're going to read and study and think about, read it aloud first. Then read it silently and just kind of sit with it, let it soak in a little bit. Then read it aloud again. No hard and fast rule. It's not like a magic formula. It's just a pretty good way for most people to encounter a poem for the first time, because you get to hear it and then you get to sit and think about it a little bit. And then you get to read it again out loud, and you're going to read it differently the second time, or the second out loud time, because you've had the time to sit with the ideas a little bit. Writing poetry. Again, for kids who are just naturally poetic, that's wonderful. For kids who are not, but who start to catch this idea of, oh, so it's really about what you want to communicate. It's about the ideas, the feelings, but you're going to do it according to this certain challenge. Okay, I get that. So that can be inspiring for kids who are kind of on the fence about it. For the kids who feel like they're not writers anyway, actually being encouraged very gently, step by step by step, to write a poem in a really non-threatening, really lighthearted, fun kind of way can be so empowering for them as writers. If they come out of it saying, I am not a writer, but I actually wrote this poem. I actually did it. Wow, okay, good for me, right? Because they understand now that poetry is not just a thing that flows from the soul, right? It's choosing to write, to express ideas within the framework of a set of rules. So they understand, oh, there was a choice here. I had this idea. I have ideas all the time. I talk about stuff all the time. I chose to write about it, and I chose to write in a challenging format. Good for me, right? So it can actually really be confidence building. So I'm now just going to talk about the poetry resources that we have at sevensistershomeschool.com, because there are several. There are poetry writing guides, 5 weeks of instruction, so not overwhelming. You're not committing to a whole semester, much less a whole year. And really gentle, fun, lighthearted, conversational style of instruction. So it's kind of like the author, Vicki Tillman, is sitting there chatting with you like she did in our co-op classes for so many years locally. The instruction is written as if the teacher is saying, oh, okay, now try this. What did you find when you did that? Did you notice this? Can you look this up in the dictionary and get some alternate definitions for it? And okay, now how do you think about that word? It's very friendly. The assignments are short, broken out into daily assignments for each of the 5 weeks. But a kid who gets running with it and wants to do 2 or 3 days worth of assignments in one day certainly could, because it's little bite-sized chunks of instruction and homework. It's not some big, overwhelming, challenging, threatening kind of stretch. We also have 2 newer guides, new this year, American Poetry Reading and Writing, and now World Poetry Reading and Writing. If you're on our email list, you heard about World Poetry Reading and Writing earlier this week. If you're not on our mailing list, you want to be. We do not spam you. We occasionally send you something that saves you a whole bunch of money. Say coupon code, discount, whatever. And we try to send you really rich, packed, value-filled information that is going to help you strategically plan your homeschooling. It's going to help you stay accountable carrying out your homeschooling. It's going to help you stay encouraged along the way in your homeschooling. So get on our email list if you are not there already. If you go to sevensistershomeschool.com and you scroll down to the bottom of the page, there's a sign me up button there. Okay? So if you're on our email list, you heard about World Poetry Reading and Writing. And one of the cool things about this one is that it is a wonderful way to help teens dig into and think about and talk about and make sense of the diversity of cultures around the world. Our teens are growing up in a very different world than we did because of the connectedness, because of the internet, because of the constant stream of information that is available to us, because of social media. It used to be, it was that you maybe read the newspaper or you watched the news once, or if you were a real news junkie, you watched it twice a day. Now, news alerts come up on your phone constantly if you have it set that way. Anytime you sign onto the internet, there are things showing up. If you're on social media at all, which apparently you are because this is a Facebook Live, right? There's things scrolling through your feed all the time. So teens are basically being presented with ideas, and sometimes very challenging ideas, and sometimes ideas that are way out of their realm of experience. And so they're trying to imagine something happening in another part of the world that is a very unfamiliar culture to them. And they're trying to make sense of it through their own eyes, through their own experience, through the limitations of the world that they live in. And so reading words that came from other cultures is a really helpful way to develop an understanding of, a respect for, an appreciation of other cultures around the world that are perhaps very different from the one in which your teen has grown up. World literature, we have a world literature curriculum at Seven Sisters as well, and the goal of that is to have your teen reading books that help them touch a culture someplace else and experience just a little bit of the world through a different set of eyes, through a different perspective. So world poetry, reading and writing, same thing. Vicki Tillman has written this with the idea being that when we read words that come from poets in that culture, translated into English, obviously we're not requiring you to, be able to read Japanese before you study haiku, but translated into English. But those ideas, those concepts that stirred these poets to write, and then to understand and analyze and respect the formats in which they wrote, the challenges that they presented for themselves, and to maybe learn a little bit about, so why would that language sound really good in that meter? And why would that possibly be? What are the historical connections for this particular style of poem, and why has it been around for so long in that culture? And what are some of the things that in the same way that when we hear "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," there's an immediate Western thing. There's an immediate Western response to the 23rd Psalm, especially the first line of it. It shows up in all kinds of movies, at graveside funeral scenes, That's not what the psalm is for, but we have all of these cultural connotations attached to it. And in the same way, in other cultures around the world, there are certain styles of poems, there are certain sections of phrases that are connected to a whole lot of cultural identity and historical identity within a culture. And so introducing teens to written words from other cultures around the world helps them make sense of the current world that they live in, where they're bombarded all the time with information from around the world via the internet. So it's kind of about a whole lot more than language arts, if you're willing to think it through and to allow it to be. And it's actually a lot of fun. So I just want to encourage you to give poetry a place in your homeschool high school. It doesn't have to be a whole year of poetry. It doesn't have to be a whole semester of poetry. But who doesn't have 5 weeks that they could throw at, let's try this as an experiment, right? Try a poetry writing guide. Try a poetry reading and writing guide. Watch some really awesome poetry readings on YouTube. Go to a poetry reading at a local bookstore or a local coffee house if you are blessed to live in an area where that kind of stuff is available. It's something that if teens are exposed to it before they're grown up and off on their own, they are much more likely to give it a chance and then to have their whole attitude toward it changed from that point forward, to be open to it on an ongoing basis, to dig deeper into it, to respect it even if they never love it, to appreciate it even if they don't want to create it themselves. It's an important thing to expose them to, and it often just kind of gets kicked to the curb. We think so much about essay writing and research papers and reading the classics, and we kind of forget poetry sometimes, but poetry is so important. All right, so give it a try. If you have had good experiences or bad experiences with poetry, share about them here on the Facebook group. We would really love for people to share their experiences, what you've liked and what you've not liked about poetry in your own experience, what your teens have expressed, because we do well when we learn from each other, right? Okay, so thank you for being here. I will see you next Wednesday. I'm back on Facebook Lives for a little bit here, and I will also be continuing self-care throughout the fall, and I encourage you to do the same. Take care. Have a good week. Bye.